Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you're well, and thank you for arriving. Our presentation for today is Loose Lips Might Sink Clouds. And as you can see with the poster over here, we took a bit with the famous British poster about loose lips might sink ships. Let's kick things off. So it's not going to be a sales pitch. We're not talking about our company at all. Just going to say a few words about us. So generally speaking, we are part of the Varonis Threat Labs, and we're responsible to all sorts of coming up with new threat detections, response capabilities, research attack techniques, persistency, exfiltrations, and whatnot. And you could read all about it later on in our blog. Not now, but there's all sorts of cool nuggets over there. Cool. So I'm Dvir.
Hello, I'm Jason. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, and
Get that sorted.
yeah, exactly. Cool. So as you all know, cloud applications and their usage, like Sason, whatever, are becoming more prominent than ever, specifically with everything related to the epidemic. And organization needs to rush, to allow employees to work from home rather than from the safe environment and safe quarters of the classic on-prem IT. So organizations knew where the organization actually start and ended, right? We know that we have these assets. We know that we have these on-prem assets. And with everything going on, such SaaS applications and SaaS services and cloud services are becoming more prominent in a way that every employee in your organization could actually become an admin of a SaaS application without anyone from the IT or security actually knowing of that, right? So think about it. It's called shadow IT. And how many organizations actually let the marketing guy actually handle and becoming an admin of the Facebook account of that organization? What happens if his account is getting compromised and someone starts posting weird ads on the company's Facebook page saying that, yeah, here's a Bitcoin scam, or you should click this and that. So that happens all the time, and this is what we're here to cover. Let's see what else. So on top of that, we can see that other applications and other services as well doesn't necessarily mean that they actually integrate either with one another or to the organization itself. So there is no centralized system or any identity provider or a user management system, centralized one, that allows the centralized user management for permissions or accounts and whatnot. Anyone could become any user of any systems, and that's it. Usually security is an afterthought. Security comes last because we need that service. We need that system right now. Let's get it over with. Let's work with that vendor because we need it. And security comes last. And that means that it leads to the high risk and high threats of affects and impacts the entire organization as a whole. So again, we covered the CISO knowledge is non-existent and the shadow IT. Of course, like I said, Facebook marketing, HubSpot, Instagram, Asana, Trello, anyone could become an admin on these platforms. So, as always, threat actors might come up with new TTPs, new techniques and tactics and procedures, but they continue to use the same age-old TTPs that we're all aware of, such as credential stuffing, phishing campaigns, exploiting publicly accessible services with publicly accessible exploits. And sometimes, in order to gain some information about the organization, about your business, it doesn't take more than a browser. This is it. That's it. And usually the mistakes that keeps on coming are misconfiguration, oversharing, and open invitations, which, misconfiguration is trying to, giving everyone the highest permission available, for all the time, I need access to that document. Okay, let's, take every permission that you need. Oversharing, allowing the information to be leveraged and misused later on. And with open invitation is allowing non-organizational users to join and access content, such as video conference and Zoom chat rooms, specifically for, I have a SharePoint link, I'm just going to send it to that vendor, and that's it. The link is still alive and still accessible by anyone from outside of the business, right? So it happens all the time. For example, third parties and subcontractors. For example, you have your third parties and they have their on third parties, what's going on when they try to share your data with their third parties. We are losing control of this data. And it keeps on happening. So we had a very opportunistic look around to see what could be acquired, while the focus was on commonly used cloud applications rather than looking through the looking glass of AWS, Azure, GCP deployments, and whatnot. So there was no specific organizations that we specifically targeted and looked for. And we could seriously just scratching the surface. I mean, like if you're looking to come up with the posture of your organization, you could, find out very easily with what we're going to talk about. On that, we'll be sharing hints and tips about how to get started and how to check out the assets and posture of your own business in order to see, for example, how transparent or how visible your organization is online. We have some real-world examples, and everything was anonymized to protect the victims. And of course, we have some recommendations to take away. Now, on top of that, we need to remember that the key risks over here for organizations are PII leakage, such as also IP, intellectual property, potential vulnerabilities that could be used later on to exploit organizations, and at the end, also data tampering of automated processes, which we'll see and talk about. You could also take these notes and take back to your organization, as we said, and this whole purpose is to, come up with some hints and ideas for you to use against your organizations. So what we're going to talk about is cloud spotting. And we have two approaches for cloud spotting. This is the fact that this is the actual actions that we talk about. So the first one is the application-oriented approach. Basically, we're looking for a specific application, and we don't care where we will find it, like Azure, GCP, and whatnot. So we try to find any exposed platform, service, or data hosted all across the board. We are less concerned at this point about targeting a specific organization. We want to see exactly how this application is actually exposing data. And we are focusing on platforms that are usually known to be prone on misconfiguration, exploits, or brute forcing. Now, this approach is also being adopted by bug hunters in order to look for cool nuggets and, of course, report it later on and whatnot. But the idea is to try and look for more data from the bird's view back in your organization about the specific application. The other approach is called the victim-oriented approach, which we want to identify any service on every cloud application being used by a specific single target organization, which this is exactly what we're talking about, the organization posture. So it's very much like the reconnaissance phase of a targeted attack. And the whole idea is to minimize the risk, minimize the blast radius for a potential attack being used later on about this organization. So victim-oriented approach is the one that's being taken by any sort of threat actors before they try to attack the organization. They try to learn as much about it, about any sort of services and applications being used in this organization.
Cool. That was a long and awkward moment standing there. So thank you. Right. So when we talk about the application orientated approach, so as Dvir said, that's very much taking a specific cloud application and then trying to find out who's using it, and then perhaps find some juicy stuff that we can take advantage of. Okay. So in this case, the first thing you need to consider when you look at that application is how is it configured, or how does the user, the organization actually use that service. So of course, three pretty common ways. You'll have the customer's name, the user dot cloud service. You'll have cloud service and then / some kind of customer name, or perhaps better, you'll have some kind of random ID. So of course, the first two options there, those identifiers will often mimic that organization's domain name. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Sometimes there may well be some slight variations. Perhaps they'll use some kind of regional marker. Perhaps it may include some kind of department, or, of course, another common one is sort of development stages where you see, QA, production, all that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, how can we then go about trying to I guess map out that cloud application? How can we perhaps work out who is using it, and then then we can trawl through that data and try and find some cool stuff. So I think one of the sort of easiest ways, and possibly combine these 2 points. So collecting passive DNS records. So if you take a look at cloudapplication.com, and then go and query passive DNS, what's been queried, what requests have gone out, that's going to give you quite a nice list of potential subdomains to have a poke. Of course, there's a handful of tools and services that you can use for this. There's various subdomain lookup tools. There's, a bunch of different services that you can go off. A lot of these have free API access. You don't have to pay anything to get started. So a very simple way to then start building up a picture of who's doing what and where. Of course, we can just crack out some code as well. So perhaps we could build a dictionary of particular terms. So here we could take perhaps Fortune 500 and grab all their domains, trim off the top level domain, and throw that against the service. So that's quite a good way of doing it. So the Alexa top 1 million, that's no longer a thing, but you can still get hold of the data set. So that's not bad. The Umbrella 1 million, just saying, takes about 7 days, I think, to trawl through that on a number of services. But yeah, if you kind of think about it, this is very basic Python here. They literally just open up that nice dictionary of terms, that list of potential organizations, and just throw it against the target. And then perhaps anything that comes back with a good response, you go, great, I'll log that. I can take a look at it later. If you're feeling a bit more involved, then of course you could actually scrape the result that comes back, perhaps then look to see if that service has got something other than a login box. Cool. When it comes to those sort of services using some kind of randomly generated or whatever identifier, this of course gets a little bit more difficult. So you could try and brute force that if you've got the time and the patience. I would imagine very quickly that application is going to tell you to go away. But yeah, that's one. Probably the easiest thing to look at though with these types of app is just some straight up search engine dorking. So that's right. So don't forget there are other services than Google. Any Bing fans in the house? Literally no one. Okay. So again, it's okay. There's no shame in using Bing. Okay. Combining your results. So again, I know that, this is teaching people how to suck eggs. A lot of people are super familiar with sort of basic dorking, but that's it. When you're trying to gather a data set that you can then go back and poke and prod, and then look to see if people are overexposing or if they've misconfigured stuff, it's almost an iterative process. Once you find an app, you then take a look at how it looks. You then might craft some decent dorks to try and gather more sources. You might throw other dictionary lists at it, combine it all. IP address one down the bottom there. This is probably the one reason why I would use Bing. So the fact that you can chuck in an IP and then potentially get a list of search results back that show you domains that are being hosted on that's kind of useful. This one in particular, if I remember, is Alsatian. So they've got some stuff on AWS. So again, poke around, throw it back in, see what comes out. Okay, from a defensive perspective, even, you always have to think of yourself as the attacker, So I'm sure there's sort of offensive practitioners in here as well as defenders. So if you are defending, pay attention as well. You need to poke and prod your own infrastructure, see what's going down. when we're when we're looking at this and when you're trying to find out everything about your own organization, you can absolutely use the methods a moment ago. You can chuck keywords at certain services. You can look at external passive DNS sources, all the rest of it. Also look at your own DNS configuration. Check out the CNAME records. Perhaps you'll see some service that's you're redirecting some nice friendly internal name to some external service. And of course, as an added bonus, you may well find some subdomain takeover opportunities as well, in which you've got some lingering record pointing to some third-party app that's no longer being used. So it's all about knowing your configuration, knowing what's going on. Again, tweak your dorks. So when you're looking for a specific application, perhaps, on those previous examples, you're looking in the title or you're looking at some URL structure, throw in your own domain. And of course, your employees, your users, all of us are probably guilty of this, that you're sharing stuff on LinkedIn. Organization have got job ads out there which will reveal technologies. All of this kind of open source intelligence gathering, again, can give you an indication of the cloud apps that are in use by an organization, and then you can start giving them a bit of a bash. Okay?
Yeah, just a sec. Wait a second. So all that is good. So we need also to ask a few more questions, such as what are we planning to achieve? We need to think like threat actors and think in that mindset. So again, what are we planning to achieve? What's the posture? How can we minimize it? Who are we targeting? Us, of course. Why are we doing this? What is our business goals? What are technologies being used, SSO, identity providers, knowledge sharing platforms like SharePoint or Atlassian or whatnot? For example, one of the key things to check out and test and verify is that whether our business uses Exchange on-prem or 365. And how do you do that? There's a specific realm that you can use while trying to access OWA that will be redirecting whether to an ADFS connector if it's on-prem or the 365 sign-in if it's in fact in 365. So that allows us to understand whether the organization is in fact living in the cloud using 365 or not, using on-prem, ADFS, and whatnot. So making it easy for threat actors, you probably can't hide the fact that you're using cloud applications, but okay, we need to make things harder for them. Okay, we need to take cloud security seriously. So of course we can't hide any banners, we can't hide any titles, responses, missing sign-in page. I mean, like, it is what it is, right? But we need to make sure that only authorized users have access to a specific limited amount of data for a specific amount of time. In order to reduce that, so to speak, like we said, blast radius, we need to make sure that everything is well defined and well contained. Now, configurations should be set to fit to purpose and control access to potentially sensitive data, as I said, and exercise care on not oversharing. I mean, like, think about the data that is being shared. Is it supposed to be online or not? Is it supposed to be internal or not? And if on that platform or not. So at the end, individuals, as we know, could help themselves and the organizations by being security aware, by protecting their credentials with all sorts of password managers, being, like I said, aware, avoiding oversharing, and not storing any sensitive data, credentials, or whatnot on personal devices or services, such as, for example, if someone says an API key of AWS in Slack because it makes their life easier, that's not the probably best idea to do. Also, we need to make sure that API keys are limited and we know how to store them. IPs are trimmed down and not being publicly mentioning. GitHub or any other Git solution, CI/CD, make sure that you don't have any API keys or secrets in your code.
Cool. So some examples. Just going to throw it out there. If it says internal only, that's not stopping anyone coming in. Okay. This this was the sort of initial result of looking at some service desk type applications. And the number of service desk applications that had links that said internal use only, or, even when it goes so far as to say, double check these settings so the articles can only be viewed by agents. And sure enough, it's publicly accessible. Anyone can go clicking in there. So a very, very clear example of misconfiguration. And I'd go so far as to say that if somebody is looking at the exposure of your organization and it says internal use only, you're pretty much going to skip everything else on the page and drill straight into this. I mean, it's inviting trouble. And misconfiguration from a perspective, this bottom left corner there, from Jenkins, so development type environment, when you have the ability to perform administration and operations on there, again, as soon as you visit that service and you see something like that, it's just incredible, really. Okay. There were countless examples of this. And again, having quite interesting documents that reveal internal configurations or the way that you go about things. It's super obvious. And any kind of confidentiality marker, I mean, these are the kinds of things that people have been Google talking for years. It's just a wealth of information to be had.
So, as we talk about oversharing, organizations face a lot of problems from oversharing both internally and externally. So, as I said, not everyone needs access to everything all the time. When exposed externally, this could be used by any sort of threat actors. And oversharing could be done in all sorts of ways, such as a well-intentioned data sharing that should have been internal only. Okay. And while in the case of vendors, this could be a huge amount of pain and trouble. Links to otherwise unindexed data being widely shared and web crawlers taking the nuggets and just indexing all over the place. Individuals, as Jason already mentioned, posting details about their work on social media. Hey, I developed this new API feature. Look at me. And that is a pain. And data being stored outside of the organization's control, such as devices, services, and whatnot.
More examples. So oversharing. So yeah, absolutely. So oversharing can be at an organizational level. So you're sharing information which really probably is for internal consumption, or it's only perhaps for viewing by select people. So when you just throw it out there, and anybody and everybody can access it, it's just a case of whether they get to it or not. That's not so good. So there were countless examples of where perhaps internal infrastructure and the way that perhaps you're doing things internally are exposed. So again, on sort of individually, these things might not be so bad. When you think of a threat actor that's conducting some recon, that's looking to target your organization, any of these small pieces of information can then help them either craft a decent lure to target individuals at your organization, or it gives them an idea of where to go once they're in. So we've got examples here that provide internal IP details. Okay, yeah, is that interesting? Yeah, sort of, maybe. When they talk about password managers being used and where that password manager data file is kept. Okay, well now we're starting to actually provide details that if someone were to compromise your network, they know exactly where to start going and looking for the real treasure, I guess. Okay, and also listing details of applications that you're using. So providing screenshots, internal screenshots that include a list of all the apps that you're using internally. So again, when you think of the process of reconnaissance, it's quite an iterative process. You find out some stuff, then you go off and you dig into that, and then you find some more, and then you come back and you can dig into that. So it allows you to kind of really build up quite a nice picture of what's going on internally. From an external perspective, that's again pretty interesting stuff. So if I'm targeting an organization, one of the first things I might do is perhaps determine, what domains are they using, what IP ranges have they got allocated, sort of build out that sort of picture of their external exposure. Now, you make life easy for us if you're sharing articles that have also got that kind of information. It may well be that some of these IP ranges are, they're not actually assigned to you as such. You're using them, but perhaps they wouldn't show up on a normal search. So again, exposing data, which is very useful to a threat actor. And organizational structure. So here we have a really helpful post. It just says company directory. Brad was the author. Did I find it helpful? Absolutely, Brad. Thank you very much. So what we've got here is a nice spreadsheet, viewable using Office Online. So I didn't even have to have Office installed. Great. And it includes the internal contact details for everybody across the entire organization. So, yeah, okay. What can I do with that? Well, hi, Brad. It's Dave, the CEO, and I'm currently in Geneva. And my password isn't letting me in. Please, can you reset it to Insomnihack? Okay. It's this kind of information that allows a social engineer or a threat actor to have a great idea of what's going on, to be able to throw in pieces of information which might then convince an unsuspecting user or employee of your organization to then grant some other access. Cool. Credentials. I mean, people aren't really posting stuff on sites that say public. I mean, like the clues there. If you're using a publicly viewable cloud service to keep notes based on your organization, perhaps keep credentials, particularly for web servers and social media accounts. So these types of examples were coming up as used by probably marketing departments and similar types of people. So not necessarily security savvy, not necessarily technically savvy. They're obviously making lives easy for themselves, but in the same time, they're oversharing, making it easy for everyone else. So, are you being too helpful? I hope not. So, of course, there's absolutely a need for some organizations to share knowledge. Okay, it goes without saying. If you're a software vendor, a hardware vendor, any organization, you are going to have documentation that you want to share with your customers. I guess the question you have to ask is, does everybody in the whole world need to know what we're going to share? Can we limit that information to perhaps just verified customers? Perhaps we have some kind of customer logon or something. And again, the examples here. So I'm not going to name any names. Absolutely, that would be terrible. But point of sale vendors, the little hardware device pin pad type guys, for some reason they love to share the details of the passwords and the key presses used to get into the menu on those devices. So again, that's quite useful information if you want to start messing around with something. Does everyone need to know that, or should that just be shared with specific users of that? And again, providing perhaps some internal knowledge that is shared externally that can be taken advantage of. So there are multiple examples of where a help desk article is telling users of that organization to, oh yeah, connect to this. When it comes up with a certificate warning, just to click ignore. Or, hey, we use AnyDesk. So if someone asks you to provide them with the number, this is what you do. So of course then as a threat actor, I'm thinking, cool. So I'm gonna target your users. They already know that if they see something like this, this nice red alert, that they can safely ignore that because there's help desk articles that tell them to do it. When I ask them to install some remote administration, some remote access software, they're like, oh yeah, cool. I do that all the time. So again, does it really need to be shared externally, or are you, kind of stitching yourself up? Cool. So with that in mind, there's tons of information out there. And of course, we always tend to think like, got to read pages and pages of stuff when doing recon. Okay. But don't forget that video content and images can also be a great source of information. So when you're looking at a lot of this content, there's often little bits in the background, or maybe right up in your face, which can be really helpful. When looking at video content, which is something that many sort of support desk type people will share, that pause button is going to super help you out when it comes to finding often overlooked details. So in this example, again, this was an internal support video. It was provided to help other administrators of a product out. But again, this is not a product that would be used externally. This is very much an internal video. So straight up, what does this tell us? Okay, it's mildly interesting, but we get an idea of the applications that are being used internally. So perhaps we can use that to perhaps steer the type of payload, the type of threat we might try and send to one of those users. Okay. We also know that perhaps the AV engine that they're using, maybe then that can help us with our sort of pre-attack planning, help us come up with a sort of method of testing what we're going to do prior to doing it. Browser, the fact that you have all of these bookmarks, again, they give us an indication of what's going on internally. So, all cool stuff. Now, in this particular video, 1Password pops up on screen, and the narrator of the video tells the other support guys, "Hey, yep, log into 1Password, grab the master password." Okay, again, we haven't got access to 1Password, but knowing that it's in use, knowing that it's out there, that could be beneficial later on in our attack. Okay, we know that there's a universal logon or a master password that's used on their product. So again, that gives us something to perhaps target and look for later. The fact then we have an account and we know the password length. Okay, maybe we could use that. But again, these are very small details tucked away in the video that can help us to formulate a plan when it comes to actually attacking. So another example of sort of when sort of video and image analysis comes in handy. We don't always have to think of ourselves as bad guys. We can be good. So perhaps you're doing some threat actor tracking or similar. And again, applying the same logic to the task. So being able to pause when someone's filling a form. So hey, this is an example of how you log onto this service. Cool. That form autofill pops up for a fraction of a second as they start to type in whatever credentials they're logging in with. So again, we can pause at that point, use that to extract some interesting indicators. And my personal favorite, the browser address bar. So again, someone's demonstrating something in a video, the browser's open, they hit the address bar, just as they're about to start typing, the autofill jumps in and reveals their dirty secrets. So, on the left-hand side there, you can see perhaps some of the sites that they frequent. The blurriness, of course, is because these screen grabs are from video content, but on the right-hand side here, we have perhaps details of a potential threat actor or threat group, which is interesting. We can see in caps there that they are interested in nudes, potentially skin-colored tights or something, I don't know. And also we have a local site which could give us an indication of where that threat actor is located. So it's almost the same logic applies to when investigating an organization or investigating a threat actor. Super cool. Okay. And finally, any of those kind of pop-ups that you see coming out of the system tray, great example of a video that a threat actor was sharing, where they were conducting some kind of payment card fraud, and practicing good OPSEC. They wanted to fire up their VPN client, but on screen for a moment, it pops up with their real IP. So again, being able to look at those little details can often give you some real good stuff.
Cool, thanks. Now for the part that we all love, recommendations. So, as part of recommendations, you need to remember that you need to be extra cautious regarding oversharing, both as an individual and organization. Make sure that you know that what's going on and should it be online and whatnot. You need to audit the existing applications and data access permissions. How did it all comes together? Do we need these accounts on this platform? Do we need, actually, this platform? combined with IT and information security. Cloud-based assets and secrets need to be managed, monitored, and protected either by secrets keeping platform, secure secrets platform, and whatnot, while we know exactly at any given moment how many cloud assets do we have, either as a cloud environment, as a cloud provider, such as, for example, we know how much money we pay for resources, cloud resources, on a daily basis. What happens if the bill is actually 10 times higher because someone broke in, ran a crypto miner on one of the VMs, and that's it, So we need to be in control all the time. When sharing invitations or links to content, you need to limit them both in time and to the intended recipients, such as exactly who's accessing the data and for how long. And while auditing, you need to make sure that you don't overlook the simple stuff. Don't take anything for granted. Exposed data on every publicly accessible site could be a trove of intelligence for threat actors who just try to attack your business. Subdomain scanning and brute forcing could reveal interesting hosts. So you need to make sure that you know your footprint. Check out how many DNS records do you have on your domains. Are they still needed? Are these CNAMEs, A records, whatever, are they still needed? Do you still need them for your daily operation? Because if the subdomain is dead, potentially, if it's still pointing, it could be the same one as Jason spoke about of a potential subdomain hijacking. Now, and this is, of course, a bit marketing-wise, image and video analysis allows often overlooked items to be found. So basically, every video and every image that you release as an organization could be used against you with these tiny bits that we've just seen that could reveal potential services and information about your organization and users. So at the end, we need to make sure that is there a need to know? Okay, who has access? Who needs to know? If there is a need to know. Okie dokie. And for that part, do we have any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for a great talk, Dvir and Jason. Please give them a big round of applause. Yeah, are there any questions for them?
Thank you for the awesome talk. What you talked about is usually the first step, the initial step of a social engineering attack or phishing attack, or maybe a red teaming operation. Do you have actual real-world examples where this kind of attacks or, initial steps were used in a global attack?
On a global scale? You want to answer that? You can. Cool. I'm not going to name any sort of event or cases, but this in fact happens all the time, either by crime groups, ransomware operators, and whatnot. This is their bread and butter. This is what they're trying to do. They map up a scale of the organization. They map up the weaknesses. They map up the information being shared, who to target, whether it's personal accounts or any other thing. And think about that. I know that a certain person works at a certain organization, and I also found their personal email. Now I'm going to target them through the personal email because we know that businesses' emails are much more protected than the usual ones. We have anti-phishing mechanisms and whatnot. But on the personal level, how many personal email accounts are in fact protected against potential phishing? So this actually happens continuously on and on and on.
Thank you.
I'll chuck a couple of words on, actually. It's given me time to think. That's always the trouble with, of course, recon and that kind of pre-attack activity, as you know, it's difficult to see and to quantify, isn't it? And it's always that part, when you think back to kill chain, which was super fashionable a good few years back, that was always at that point in the kill chain, it was really difficult to see what's going on, and to get an understanding. I would suggest kind of anecdotally that it sort of seems in some cases ransomware operators are definitely having a good sort of recon phase, and I think perhaps when you look at some of the data that is overshared and when you look at some of those misconfigurations, I think it's very easy to see that those types of operator would know to go looking and could very easily take advantage of it. So, yeah, I think to answer the question or to completely skeet around it, it's super difficult to know who's doing what recon. And of course, everyone's being scanned all the time by everyone, good and bad. But that's it. When you have got this kind of stuff floating around out there, it's literally a matter of time before it's used. So, all those credentials, that are being shared by individuals, as it happens, some of those posts, and some of that information that was shared, it was years old. And so it's safe to say that's long been burnt. Why they haven't gone back and cleaned up their own sort of oversharing, I don't know. But that's it. It's probably just a matter of time.
Any more questions for them?
So you provided some recommendations, but do you also have tangible actions that companies can take?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to, tangible actions would be for IT and information security to work together to map out the entire assets, to work with every department leader to ask them specifically on a one-on-one conversation, are there any SaaS applications that you use with your own personal credentials that I'm not aware of? Cool. Let's talk about it and start minimizing the entire applications and permissions and connecting it all together, because this is in fact the pain point. This is in fact the potential blast radius that could happen. And of course, awareness and making sure that it's a bit about governance, about how information security actually controls the business and are fully aware. On top of that, I would definitely recommend on getting incident response procedures well tightened and sharpened at any given moment. Incident response teams should know exactly what to look for in what systems at any given moment. And of course, not to delve into that, but it goes on and on.
And so would you say that cyber awareness is a huge factor in this?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end, since the responsibility relies at the end user of every organization, we need to make sure that sometimes not the less technical personnel will know how to act online, what to share, what not to share, according to company procedures and whatnot. I think awareness is a key factor when it comes to how users maintain and keep their passwords and not sharing it around. Or should they disregard weird emails coming from, I don't know, a guy that talks like the help desk? It's being aware is a key factor.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Well, I'm completely sympathetic with recommendations. Did you ever implement those recommendations in a larger scale company yourself? Have you ever done this? And how did you do this?
So it's not easy. It's not a process that, it's you can finish up in a week. Procedures and processes takes a very long time to address and, of course, to map out. I'm not disrespecting it at all, and I'm fully aware of that. On a personal level, I've been working in a large-scale organization, and, things in motion could take years to come and into fruition.
And once you're through, you have to start again because your
Exactly.
IT sphere has been completely changed.
Exactly. So it needs to be done hand in hand, IT information security at any given moment, specifically about organizations that have major production systems that can never be done at any given moment, but also information sharing and whatnot. So, of course, it's a long process, but at the end, we need to squish the major bugs. You need to make sure that the big issues are being solved ASAP.
Can you give some numbers for your company you worked for? Numbers of employees,
we can talk about it later.
Numbers of devices, numbers of web pages.
We can talk about it later. I'm talking about, a few thousand computers. We can catch up later on.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to throw some more words on that one as well. So yeah, absolutely. Of course, I think often we're thinking of this from a super large scale and all the rest of it. But probably one of the most important things that we can do as security professionals is to increase awareness in general. And that's not just, talking to like-minded people or, saying to security teams, oh, you need to bash all your users. I think that's also a case of sharing your knowledge and your expertise, and some sort of guidance, with the people around you in your immediate life. So, talk to your family, help them understand the types of risks and dangers, and it's almost like all these little steps. If everyone's more aware, when you can actually get down to, that person that has no interest in technology or, has no interest in security or, what's that all about? If you can get through to them that there's just a few little things that they can do to help protect themselves, that then in turn will help protect their employer and their organization. And, it kind of perhaps then echoes up. So absolutely apply everything from, almost from the top down, but I think just help people in general, to just become a bit more security savvy. Invariably now everyone, no matter how sort of old school you are or how much you hate technology, everyone's got technology at home. Everyone has to use technology for banking and shopping and all the rest of it. Everyone's probably got hundreds of passwords. Some people have got hundreds of passwords. Probably a lot of people have got one password, and that's kind of the point. If you can get through to those people, what they learn in that sort of throwaway conversation over a pint can then make everyone else's job a lot easier, perhaps.
Thanks.
Any last questions for Dvir and Jason? Well, thank you very much again, and please give them another round of applause.
Thank you very much.